Hey gamers, it's G from the corner, and today we're going to be talking about Sonic X Shadow Generations. It's been a little bit since this game came out, and kind of wanted to let it simmer a little before I gave my thoughts. Last year, I put out a review of Sonic Superstars mere days after it released. In fact, I only played the game for about 24 hours before getting a full refund. Thank you, Nintendo. But with this game, I picked it up physical. No easy email refund here. I figured I would give it some time. It took quite a bit to play through both games here, Sonic Generations and Shadow Generations. And I gotta say, my opinions are a lot more positive than they were about this series last year. Let's just say, I feel like maybe I should talk a bit about my history and experience with the Blue Hedgehog, because, last year, people probably watched that video thinking that I was coming in like a hater. I'd never played a Sonic game, or I had only played Mania, and, was just like, grr, it's not Mania 2, so it's bad. I still think Superstars is a bad game, for the record, don't get me wrong, but it's not like I hate the franchise. I used to love Sonic growing up, I played Generations, Colors, Lost World. I loved all of them, regardless of quality. But, as time goes on, obviously, this game wasn't as good as I remember. This game doesn't hold up. This new game isn't very good. I kind of had a soured opinion on the series for quite some time. Forces was kind of the nail in the coffin. I mean, the fans made a game that was so fantastic, and yet Sega, with extra time and delays past the anniversary year for polish, couldn't whoop up anything worth talking about. A game that just reused assets for most of its run. Like, come on. This is ridiculous. This is a joke, I can't believe they did this. I don't care anymore. These are all gonna be bad games. That was my thought process for quite some time, I gave Sonic Frontiers a shot, and while it was, by technicality, a step in the right direction, it still had many of the problems I had with other games. Again, heavy asset reuse, heck, level design reuse. It was tons of fun. I really liked the new direction they took it in, but it felt like they couldn't go in that direction. It felt like they didn't have enough money or time to really kind of do everything they wanted to do. But now the latest Sonic game, developed by Sonic Team, is here. Really latest half game, though. You see, this is kind of just a port of Generations with a side game stapled onto it. A side game featuring a darker, edgier tone with a similar yet different gameplay style. Hang on a second. I feel like I've seen this before. That's right, this is pretty much shot for shot 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, right down to the damn menu layout. You boot up this game and it's literally the exact same style. Shadow Generations, you can select from a file on that menu. Sonic Generations takes you to the game's title screen to actually jump in. That's honestly pretty funny. I mean, look, as much as I do like the game, which I do like it quite a bit, it's pretty clear to me that Sega's idea for this was, 3D World plus Bowser's Fury was a good thing for Mario. Why don't we kind of do that for Sonic? Re-release the safest, most on-brand game in the series and bundle in a little side story. Why not? It should work. And hey, we have a third movie coming out. Why don't we do something with Shadow? The fans are really gonna dig that, I'm sure. Everybody loves to reminisce about the early 2000s games now. So alright, let's stop with the pre-ramble. Let's get right into it. Sonic X Shadow Generations. What do I think of it? For starters, I think we should just talk about base Sonic Generations here. This is two games in one package, and it's not like I've talked about Generations before. Heck, I actually haven't played Generations in, I want to say, 11 years. Seriously, it's been a long time since I played this game. I know everything about this game. I know it like the back of my hand. I've seen so many videos on it. I used to watch a lot of videos on it as a very young child before I had an Xbox 360 to play it on. But I haven't played the game, just start to finish, in a long time. Heck, I was so rusty, I forgot about the boss keys. I thought you could just do the acts and all the challenges were optional, but no, you do have to do a challenge between acts. Sonic Generations, for those who don't know, it is a 3D Sonic game. It uses this boost formula where basically the levels are kind of hallway-esque, but not really super hallway-esque. They're very flowing 3D platforming levels, but they're more about speed than platforming, This is the, third game in that style, and according to a lot of people, it is the best game in that style, solely for its focus. It only has Sonic with this boost gameplay and a new take on the classic 2D gameplay from the old games, because a lot of the game is like Sonic meets himself from the past or another dimension. They keep retconning it, whatever, who cares? But basically, it's the excuse to have the modern style of gameplay and the classic style of gameplay. Now, in retrospect, this game is really funny. You see, in the time, this was the Sonic is back game, They were kind of on a winning streak, right? Unleashed kind of brought them back up from the depths that 06 left them in, but, you know, there were still these weird God of War DMC Werehog segments that people didn't like. Then Colors was fantastic, you know, at least at the time people thought that. I mean, I think the game's all right. That's a video for another day, though. It was a standard Sonic game that was pretty darn good. Maybe the only issues were that it was a little bit bloated, you know, like there were really only 2 stages in an area, and then they just kind of kept repeating level designs for later stages with throwing in gimmicks. Like, you know, it's nothing... That's really not that big of a criticism. But then Generations comes in and it's all packed, no filler whatsoever, you know. There's challenges on the side, but they're just on the side. It's great. It's everything everybody's ever wanted. So coming back to it after all these years, what do I think of it? You know, honestly, with so many platformers I've played and with other Sonic games I've played and with the other Sonic game that comes in this duology, I gotta say, this style of Sonic doesn't really hold up super well to me. The game is still very pretty. The levels are still, you know, somewhat fun to play through. I really think the middle to later chunk of the game is where it really shined for me. The classic stuff was never really super fun. Not my favorite part of the game at all, especially, you know, after all the other crap we've gotten. This is easily not the worst. Forces is definitely worse, but it's not as good as Mania or even Superstars controls-wise. You see, this game design kind of presents an issue. Sonic is a platformer. You need precision, you need to, you know, make jumps, do actions. That's how platformers work. But the thing is, the whole gimmick of the game is going super, super fast. So you're not really going to get any platforming that doesn't drag the game to a complete halt. You know, there's platforming by technicality. You will jump over platforms and onto ledges, and you'll use your homing attack to kind of maneuver along a path, you know. But it's not like a stellar 3D platformer. I've played plenty of platformers that, you know, maybe are speedy, maybe not speedy, but this game and these games from this era as a whole just don't really feel too reliant on making jumps and, you know, maneuvering across platforms, aside from the 2D segments, but those are easily the worst parts of the game. You always want to be in those 3D segments because they're so exhilarating and fun. This presents a problem with the game design itself. The game can't be super long, especially not in the HD era. You have to make these huge, expansive levels because, let's face it, if you make a level that isn't like that's the length of a normal platformer level, with this kind of speed, it'll be done in like less than a minute. That's what Forces did, and that's why everybody hates that game. So with Generations, you know, it's really only an hour and a half, 2-hour game from start to finish, and that's even with having to do a challenge for each of the 3 sort of eras they portray in the game. It's a lose-lose in my opinion. Less precise gameplay and less content to boot. I don't really like the style that much, but it's not like the worst thing ever. You know, I still had fun. Rooftop Run Act 2, Ocean Palace Act 2, and Crisis City Act 2 were easily my highlights of the game. But, you know, other than that, it's all right. You know, I'm going through the motions. It's a Sonic game. It's fun enough, right? It's not terrible, but it's crazy to me that the industry and this series were in such a state to where people were giving this game 9s, if not 10 out of 10s. People were citing this as the best Sonic game ever made. It's all surprising to me, and I feel like I really don't have a place to speak. For crying out loud, I see fun in Sonic Lost World and Sonic 3D Blast from time to time. It's not like I'm saying I don't see any fun to be had in this game, though. I really like Generations. It's a good Sonic game. It is probably one of the best 3D Sonic games. But, you know, when I think of this game, I kind of just think, oh, everything kind of went downhill after this. You know, they kept trying a bunch of new things, then Forces happened, and then we kind of entered this asset reuse purgatory where every single game has to use the exact same assets, and they really just don't have time or money ever. It doesn't seem like any amount of time or money is enough to make a fully original game. And, you know, going back to it, I'm not really thinking about that the entire time I'm playing it. I'm thinking about Sonic Generations and the positive aspects about that game, but it's like, is it really that good? It's not really that good, you know? And I mean, like, it's weird to me because I feel like everybody used to say this was the best Sonic game. Like, this is the best Sonic game, no matter what, you know? But then people were like, oh, well, actually, I really love the adventure games. But it's weird to me because I go back to Adventure 1 and I'm like, that's not really that great. I've yet to play Adventure 2, really ever. I mean, I might have tried it at a friend's house one time when I was younger, but you know, I'll play that one eventually and maybe I'll think it's the best game and I'll join the early 2000s armada. But like, I don't know, man. 3D Sonic, maybe it was never good. I don't want to say it was never good. This game's good. This game is fine. And for being about like 55% of the package you're getting here, I would recommend it. But with all that said, how about Shadow Generations? Ooh, Shadow the Hedgehog, a new game starring Mr. Alien Hedgehog Edgelord himself. I wonder if he's going to have a gun this time. Look, Shadow 2005 is a very funny video game, I'm going to say. I don't think it's a good one. People apparently think it's a good one nowadays. Look, I mean, you're all entitled to your own opinions. I love this game for all of the wrong reasons. Although I do have to say I admire some of its attempts. Like, you know, they want to do a morality system. That's cool. They gave it a kind of edgier tone. They gave him this weird backstory. I think the game's cool, but in a very cheesy way, you know? It's just that there's other issues that prevent me from really liking the game all that much, you know? That's the unfortunate thing. But Shadow Generations, on the other hand, I mean, this is a Shadow game in the new age. I mean, it's tacked on to this Sonic Generations port, so, you know, I doubt it's going to have the most amount of resources. I mean, like, they probably put it in there just to kind of make up for the fact that the game they were planning wasn't very big in scope. It'll probably be no longer than, let's say, an hour, maybe. Yeah, you know, comparing 3D World to Bowser's Fury is a significantly shorter game, so it would make sense to expect the same out of Shadow Generations. Except you remember that all these games are short, so, I mean, like, hey, how much shorter can it be? And the answer is actually not that much shorter. There's only, like, 3 less levels in this game than in base Generations, which was surprising. I don't know why. I was kind of only expecting 3 or 4 levels, but that's really cool. This game takes place concurrently with Sonic Generations. There's a little bit of retconning going on to kind of make it happen alongside that game. Shadow wasn't at Sonic's birthday because he was on the Ark, because there was a weird reading, and that reading was Black Doom. He's back from the dead, and because of the Time Eater shenanigans from base Generations, he's able to do some weird stuff. You know, it's a fun setup for, admittedly, the same kind of game as Sonic Generations. There's an Act 1 and an Act 2 for all these classic stages from previous games, and, you know, one of them's a 3D act, one of them's a 2D act. There's no classic Shadow they invented for this game. It's just there are 3D stages and there are 2D stages, and, you know, honestly, the 2D stages aren't that bad. I was bad-mouthing them earlier, but honestly, these ones are pretty alright. In fact, I actually kind of like this game more than Generations. Actually, I like this game significantly more than Generations. Actually, let's be real, this is the best 3D Sonic game, no questions asked. It might be a bold statement, maybe. I really don't think it is. The game controls well, and the levels are good. That's really all I need to say. I mean, like, they took the Frontiers gameplay, which, honestly, Frontiers' gameplay was perfectly fine. I thought the first area of the game was great, actually. It really set me up to get excited about the game. Like, I thought I was going to love Frontiers, but it kind of just tanked off towards the end. This game just kind of takes that control scheme and puts it on the regular stages. I mean, they added in the boost from, you know, Generations, but it really doesn't feel... The game's not as fast, I guess. That's kind of the main thing here, but that's actually kind of a benefit for me. I mean, I complained about the lack of precise platforming in the previous game and how, you know, the boost gameplay didn't go well with what I like in a platformer, but here they are toning down that boost to make for what I thought was a super fun game. The hub world you explore is in 3D. You go to each of the stages, these big dioramas. There's, like, I don't know, there's a funness to the overworld. Again, you know, it's very similar to Bowser's Fury. Instead of having architecture based on the zones, it's like this white and yellow kind of design, which immediately makes me think Bowser's Fury. And then you get an ability to surf over the vast water in that overworld. This is just Bowser's Fury, man. It's so funny. It's actually so funny how similar this is to Bowser's Fury, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The plot is told through these cutscenes that are super well animated. There's some pretty fun boss fights you do throughout the campaign. You know, all stuff from older games, obviously. There's some cool callbacks to Heroes and even 06, right? They do fun stuff with that. They bring back, you know, Space Colony Arc, Rail Canyon, Kingdom Valley, all stages from games Shadow is heavily involved in. Then they bring back Sunset Heights from Forces. I mean, that takes place... So that game takes place after Generations, yeah? Why is it here from the past? Okay, well, I mean, Shadow did have a big part in Forces, so I guess it makes sense. Oh, here's Chaos Island from Frontiers. Shadow's not in Frontiers. They did this because they had to reuse assets. We're back where we started. Like you can't even make the short side game without having to make every act have a second 2D only stage, and you have to reuse assets for half the stages. Like, oh my god. Okay, like look, there's no stages from Shadow the Hedgehog in this game, which is very funny to me. I feel like that's them trying to distance themselves from that game, despite, you know, it being pretty much a direct sequel to the game. I mean, Black Doom's here. He's got a plan that's, you know, him taking revenge from what happened in Shadow the Hedgehog. I mean, like, you know, they like the game clearly, but they don't want to really acknowledge the game. I don't know why, but you keep getting warped into Radical Highway from SA2 all the time. This was Shadow's first stage in that game. Now, there's already an SA2 stage, the Space Colony Arc, but why wouldn't this just be a stage from Shadow the Hedgehog? Heck, why isn't it Westopolis? I mean, Westopolis is the first stage of Shadow's home game, and you go there all the time because, you know, that game has branching paths. So if you want to see the whole game, you have to play Westopolis at least like 10 times, right? So it would only make sense, you know, bring him back to that stage. They do this every stage, for the record, except for like Sunset Heights, or no, Kingdom Valley. It was Kingdom Valley. Comments don't get mad at me. It was Kingdom Valley. I know it's Kingdom Valley. And then also the final stage of the game is Radical Highway again. Look, I'll be real. I'm pretty sure this was another asset flip. They've had plenty of city assets in the last few games. Obviously, Generations has, you know, Speed Highway and Crisis City you could pull stuff from. And then I guess probably Rooftop. No, I don't think Rooftop Run stuff would fit here. Maybe like it might have been that city from like Frontiers. Like they had like Green Hill, Sky Sanctuary, and Chemical Plant reused there. And also, I guess, city assets, so sure, they probably reuse those assets. Actually, it might be exactly the same, honestly. Maybe not exactly, but, like, pretty similar. They're both trippy areas over these voids that look kind of like cities, right? Radical Highway barely looks like Radical Highway. It's more so a psychedelic trip, probably because that would have required them to actually remake the assets for it to look like Radical Highway. I feel like I'm nitpicking way too much. Again, it's a fun game. Like, I don't know. It's not bad. It just, you know, the more time I've had to sit, it's like, I'm thinking, wow, this is just so low quality. Like, how do these guys spend this much time on games and yet they can't do anything? How does Frontier still have to use old level themes? Why does this game have to be sandwiched to another game, and even then it can barely pull off using its own assets? Like, what are these guys doing right now? Are they doing like an adventure remake or something? I doubt it. That would require them to have to do 6 gameplay styles, and they couldn't reuse assets for that game because then they'd have to go back and do all the levels. What are they going to use the assets from Cool Edge and Sonic Unleashed from like 20 years ago almost? Like, I don't know, man. It's weird. It's really weird. I think I should wrap up by talking about the version I played. I played the Switch version again. Why did I play the Switch version when the PlayStation version apparently has exclusive content and they kept marketing it exclusively at PlayStation events, so you probably thought it was a PlayStation exclusive for a time? I just kind of wanted to see how it ran on Switch. You know, like, look, Generations is a game that obviously we've always talked about. And, you know, it had a 3DS port actually back in the day. So having a handheld version of the actual Generations sounded pretty cool. And, you know, I figured it's literally an Xbox 360 game. How bad could it be? And yeah, it was perfectly fine. I mean, like, okay, not perfectly fine. There was one time when I was playing original Generations and like the floor forgot to load, and then I started a level and the lighting, like the baked lighting, didn't come in for like a split second, so I could see everything kind of pre-cooked and it looked pretty rough. You know, it's funny because both games are clearly ports, but they're ports in different ways. Like Generations feels like some weird emulation kind of source code bring over, like, okay, we're literally just taking Generations and slapping it onto the Switch, right? And let's see how well we can get that game to run. Whereas Shadow Generations, it feels like they kind of remade the game for the Switch. Like the assets kind of have that like dithering quality. Is dithering the right word? Anti-aliasing, you know, like it looks really pixelated and really low resolution. Like, you know what I mean? It looks a bit silly, right? It doesn't affect the gameplay at all. The game runs at a solid 30 FPS, which, you know, again, lower than the other guys, but honestly, I don't really mind in a game like this. I mean, for crying out loud, base Generations on an Xbox 360 ran at 30 FPS. So having like a re-release of the game also run at that level, it's fine to me. Actually, you know what? I think I had the same exact logic with the port of We Love Katamari. I feel like I said that exact thing in the review a year ago, but like, yeah, you know, again, if the old version ran at that frame rate, like, I don't really mind the hit. The Switch is the system I play most of my games on anyway, so being able to put a game on the Switch is super fun, you know? Like, I'm not picking up a game on PlayStation or my PC unless I literally have to, or the disparity is so significant to where I feel like I'd be an idiot for picking up the Switch version. The Switch version of Shadow Generations is perfectly fine. It's a perfectly fine game, and honestly, Sonic X Shadow Generations as a whole is a perfectly fine game. If you're looking for a Sonic game to play on modern consoles, this is probably the one. I mean, like, you know, some people like Frontiers, some people like Superstars. Everybody loves Mania. Mania, you probably have already played it if you're looking at buying a 3D Sonic game like this, you know. But regardless of that, regardless of any of the issues I have with this game and the series estate as a whole, it's still fun. It's still worth it. It's not full price. It's, $50 American? It was like 66 bucks Canadian or something for me. So, like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's around that price point. Yeah, I like this game. It's all right. You know, Sonic Generations at least, is an all right Sonic game. It's not the best in the world. Shadow Generations is a pretty fun time. You know, you got all these cool gimmicks. You got all these cool stages. I really like it. I think it's a great step in the right direction, so to speak, but at least it's actually a damn good game. At least it's not a step in the right direction, but it's filled with flaws and you don't want to finish it. This is a good Sonic game, and I hope that whatever they're doing next is also pretty good. I also hope that movie 3 is pretty fun. I can't wait to go watch that. Keep yourselves cornered for more gaming, Nintendo, Sonic, Sony, Xbox, all the guys, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.